There are these strange moments in parenting when something that has required you every day suddenly doesn't. For years, somebody needs you to tie their shoe. I know people will say that I'll miss that one day. I probably will. I'm not there yet. Same with brushing their teeth. There may be a sweet memory in there somewhere, but right now, it mostly feels like holding a small person's face still while trying to clean their teeth as they explain why they can't stop moving. Then one day, they put on their own shoes. They go play with each other instead of saying, "Dad, Dad, Dad, Dad." A few weeks ago, I was running beside my son while he rode his bike. Running beside a kid on a bike is low-key one of the hardest parts of parenting, honestly. There is no natural way to do it. You're half running, half bent over, one hand near the seat, trying to look calm while both of you know that one wobble could take everybody down, right? And then he started riding. I slowed down. He kept going. And I realized I wasn't needed in the same way anymore. That night, even, we got the kids to bed. We finally solidified bedtime enough that Marcy and I look at each other like, what do people do now? And then, what do you know? The phone rang. Somebody needed something, and I felt this resistance in me. I just got this back. I think that's what happens when life finally gets a little easier. We want to protect it. We don't want another need turning a good season back into an exhausting one. But what if one reason God gives us more peace or strength or time or provision is that now some of it is available? Not all of it, not for every need, not until the good is gone, but maybe a good gift isn't only something to enjoy. Maybe it's also something we can hold open enough that some of its goodness reaches somebody else. Hey, this is Jonathan, counselor at Sound Mind, professor at Living Faith Bible Institute, and a pastor right here in Kansas City at Midtown Baptist Temple. And this is Sound Mind, where we take a deeper look at life through a biblical lens. We're continuing this series about stewarding the good. We've talked about learning to notice what's good, letting it land, making room for what matters, and paying attention to the condition of the things God has placed in our care. But eventually, stewardship has to turn outward because sometimes a good season gives us something we didn't have before. A little more strength or peace, a little more time, maybe some financial margin, maybe enough emotional capacity to notice that someone else is struggling without immediately feeling like you're about to fall apart. And I think this is where it can get complicated, because if you've spent a long time exhausted or have felt overwhelmed or just trying to keep everything in your life together, the last thing that you want is for every new ounce of strength to immediately become somebody else's. How do we receive what God has given us without feeling bombarded by guilt and still remain open to the possibility that some of it could bless somebody else? How do we let the good spill over without turning it back into pressure? All right, let's talk about it. I think one reason we become protective of a good season is that sometimes it took us a long time to get there. Maybe life has felt heavy for a while, or every conversation needed something from you. Every part of life seemed to require attention at the same time. You were getting through the week by moving whatever was most urgent to the front and hoping nothing important quietly fell apart behind you. And then something changes. The pressure lifts, your health improves, the kids get a little bit older, the relationships become more stable. You finally get some help, or maybe nothing dramatic happens. You just realize one day that you are not carrying the same weight you were like 6 months ago. Things feel lighter, and I think we should let that feel good. I say that because I'm not always very good at that. I can enjoy something for like 3 minutes before I start asking what I'm supposed to do with it. If I have an open evening, I think about the work I could catch up on. If I feel rested, I start identifying everything I should now have enough energy to accomplish. If the kids are playing quietly, I don't always sit there and enjoy the fact that nobody's asking me to open a snack or find something directly in front of them. I start opening my computer. I can take a moment of peace and assign it to a project before peace has fully arrived. And sometimes that feels like stewardship. I don't want to waste time. I don't want to waste my life. I want to be responsible. But there are times when receiving the good means not immediately requiring it to prove its usefulness. Sometimes the appropriate response to a quiet evening is to have a quiet evening. Sometimes you need to recognize that something is better before deciding what else you should do. Because when you've spent a long time trying to keep up, relief can start to feel strange. Humans don't do what's necessarily good for them. They just do what's familiar. You're waiting for the next thing. You have some margin, but people you love don't. And without realizing it, gratitude starts becoming more like guilt. And listen, I don't think guilt has the same effect as generosity. Guilt looks at something good and says, you should not be enjoying this while somebody else is hurting. Gratitude, it says, this is good. I want to receive it honestly. Thank God for it. And remain open to what He may want to do through it. Those are completely different postures. And that matters, I think, because if we never really receive the good, we may not know how to give from it without resentment. We'll say yes to something, but then internally we'll keep track of what that yes cost us. We'll offer our time while quietly wishing nobody had asked. And listen, sometimes love, it's just costly. Sometimes giving is inconvenient, and I'm not suggesting we wait until generosity feels effortless, because it won't. But there is a difference between sacrifice and living with the constant sense that every need is taking away the life we were supposed to have. Maybe part of becoming generous is first recognizing this life is not being stolen from me. This peace that I have is a gift. The strength I have, the season I'm in, these are gifts. And I'm allowed to enjoy what God has given me. But if it really is a gift, I don't have to grip it like I'm the only one responsible for keeping it alive. I can receive it. I can enjoy it. And then I can begin asking a whole nother question. What has this good made possible that was not possible before? A few mornings ago, I was running down our street while Marcy was pulling out with the kids. I was feeling super overwhelmed, not in some like dramatic, everything's falling apart kind of way. I just had too much in my head and I couldn't figure out where to put my attention first. She rolled down the window, mostly just trying to say bye, and instead, I emotionally dumped on her through the car window. I started telling her what was going on. Part of it was feeling overcommitted. Part of it was this series, because God has been using these episodes to confront me while I'm writing them. I've been talking about noticing the good, making room for what matters, and paying attention to what God has already placed in my care. And then I look at my life and realize how easy it is for me to overlook the good because I'm focused on everything I still think needs to happen. So as I'm dumping on her, I pointed toward a few houses in our neighborhood and told her that, gosh, I wish I had more room to know people better, to be available, to serve them, to be more present as a Christian in the place where we actually live. And honestly, that desire is sincere. I really do want more of that. But there I was, already feeling overwhelmed, identifying several additional people I felt like I should probably be doing more for. And Marcy listened, as she does, and she reminded me, softly, carefully, of some of the ways God is already allowing us to help people. Not because she thought I should stop caring about our neighbors. She has the same conviction. She was just helping me see that I was so focused on what I wished I was doing, that I wasn't noticing what God was already doing. And I think that's an important part of our conversation right now. Sometimes the first step toward generosity isn't adding something. It's noticing what God has already placed in your hands. Scripture speaks to this. We see in 1 Timothy 6, it tells those who have been given material provision not to trust in uncertain riches, but in the living God who giveth us richly all things to enjoy. And then Paul says, that they do good, that they be rich in good works, ready to distribute, willing to communicate. I love that those ideas sit together. God gives richly to enjoy. And what he gives can also make us ready to give. The enjoyment isn't an embarrassing part we need to move past before we get to the spiritual part. Receiving the gift is part of the spiritual part. But eventually, gratitude begins to notice capacity. Maybe you have financial margin you didn't have before. Maybe your children are older and you have a little time back. Maybe you've walked through something difficult and now you can sit with someone else without needing their story to become about yours. Maybe your home has become stable enough to make room for another person. Maybe you have an experience, a relationship, a skill, or simply enough emotional strength to notice a need without immediately feeling crushed by it. That doesn't mean every form of capacity becomes a new assignment. But it does mean we can ask, what's available now that wasn't available before? Not, what should I add because I'm still not doing enough? Or not this either. How can I prove that I'm using my life well? What has God created in this season that could become useful to someone else? And sometimes the answer isn't an idea. Sometimes God places a person directly in the middle of your life. One of the things Marcy reminded me of that morning was Hudson. Hudson is in his 20s. We're close friends with his parents who are planning a church in London, England, and for a season he needed somewhere to stay between homes. Okay. So we opened our home to him. And I want to be careful telling this story because I don't want it to sound like, oh, look at us. We let someone live in our house. That's not really how it felt at all. It felt more like we had a spare room and there was someone we loved who could use it. So he moved in, and honestly, it's been such a blessing having him here. He helps around the house. He's great with the kids, like built-in babysitter status helps with the kids. He's just easy to be around. Then one day he brought me Oreos and brought Marcy flowers, and I ran to my phone and texted his dad. Bro, how am I supposed to compete with this guy? He's living in my house and buying flowers for my wife. We opened our home thinking we had something we could offer him, and we did, but God also brought something good into our home through him. His presence has been a gift to us. And I know this feeling. I've been the Hudson in the spare bedroom. I don't know if I was as much a gift, but in my 20s, Brandon Briscoe, who's a pastor here at Midtown and the host of The Postscript, and my best friend in the world, his family let me live with them for almost a year. They had a real home and a family, and I was the younger guy crashing in their spare bedroom for a season. When I moved out, I think I gave them a $40 Target gift card, which feels like a pretty uneven exchange for a year of housing. But their willingness to make room for me was absolutely life-changing. And I think that's part of what I can miss when I think about generosity. I can picture it as one person who has something, giving it to someone who doesn't. But relationships are rarely that simple. Sometimes you make room for someone and they bring something into your life that you didn't know you needed. Sometimes you think you're helping somebody through a difficult season and God uses them to remind you what's good in your own life. That doesn't mean every act of generosity comes back to us in an obvious way. Sometimes giving is simply just giving. Sometimes it costs us. We may never see what came from it, but an open hand allows God to do more than we could plan. It lets the good move. A home, a meal, some time, or a little extra provision becomes part of someone else's story. And sometimes their story becomes part of ours. That's what happened with Hudson. We had something available, a room, a place at the table, some stability. And when we held it open, the blessing didn't move in only one direction. The good spilled over to him, and some of his goodness spilled over to us. I think I want more of that. Not necessarily more people living in our house at all times, no, but more of a life that is open enough for God to use what he has given us in ways we couldn't have scheduled it or predicted it. So I think the question is this: how can we remain that open without turning every good thing back into another exhausting responsibility? I think this is where I need to be careful, because I can hear an episode about being available to God and immediately turn it into several new things I should be doing. I know how to take conviction and turn it into a calendar problem. More dinners, more people, more conversations, more opportunities. And then a month later, I'm overwhelmed again, wondering why the good season disappeared so quickly. Being open-handed doesn't mean every need becomes mine. It doesn't mean every interpretation is from God. It doesn't mean that because I could help, I'm automatically the one person who should. There are already people and responsibilities God has clearly placed in my care, my family, my church, the people I counsel, the work He has actually given me to do. Sometimes faithfulness means protecting those things from another good opportunity, but I also don't want to use that as a reason to become unavailable. When I was in my 20s, all this felt so different. I had responsibilities, but I also had so much more unplanned time. It felt easier to respond when something came up, to stay longer or to go somewhere, to sit with somebody, to let the day become something different than what I had expected. Now my life has a lot more appointments, and many of those appointments are good. They're part of what God has called me to. But sometimes I wonder if I can have so many of my own appointments that I miss one of His. Not because every unexpected conversation is a divine appointment. That's for sure not the case. Sometimes an unexpected conversation is just an unexpected conversation. But I don't want to become so efficient at managing my life that there's no room left for God to direct any of it. Romans 12 calls us to present our bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is our reasonable service. A living sacrifice, though, is still alive. It raises children. It keeps commitments. It builds a home. It enjoys dinner and puts the kids to bed. But underneath all of that is the recognition: my life belongs to God. And I think it's possible to build a genuinely good Christian life and still lose sight of all that. We can raise our kids well, go to church, give and serve and work hard, protect our families, do all the things we're supposed to do, and still construct a life that's so carefully protected that it never really becomes available for the purpose God gave it to us. Jesus didn't leave us here only to become stable, responsible people with healthy families. Those things obviously matter. They're a part of our witness to an onlooking world, but He has also called us to make disciples and to love people, to carry the gospel into the lives already around us. That doesn't require saying yes to everything, but it requires remembering that the answer can't always be no. An open hand is not an open calendar. It's a surrendered life, a life that can receive something good without guilt. It can protect what God has entrusted it and still ask, Lord, is any of this available for what you want to do? When I think back to running beside my son on his bike, the thing that stays with me is how quietly the change happened. For a while, he needed me right beside him. Then he didn't. He kept riding. I stood there in that moment. It's like one of those moments in your life where you realize something big just happened, and then in that moment, something had practically become easier. Something had been given back. And I think there are moments like that all through life. The pressure changes, the kids grow, a hard season ends, you begin to feel stronger. There's a little more room at the table, or in the budget, or in your mind, or in your week. And maybe the first response right there is simply, thank you, God. This is good. I want to enjoy this. But then, without turning the gift into another burden, we can ask, what has this good made available? So here's the practice for this week. Name one thing God has given you right now. Not the life you wish you had, not the capacity you hope to have eventually. What is good right now? Then ask, because of this, what do I have available? Maybe it's time. Maybe it's a little more money. Maybe a meal, a spare room, experience. Maybe it's encouragement, a connection you can make. Enough emotional strength to sit with somebody who's hurting. Then think of one person who could experience a small part of that goodness. It doesn't need to be 10 people, not a new ministry you need to get going, not an indefinite commitment that you will resent 3 weeks from now. Just one person, one simple act. Send the text, make the invitation, buy the meal, offer the ride, give the hour, open the door. And then let that be enough. God gives us richly all things to enjoy, and He calls us to be ready to give. Those are not competing ideas. We can receive the good without guilt. We can protect what God has placed in our care. And we can still hold it loosely enough that some of its goodness reaches the people God has placed in our path. Sometimes the best way to honor a good gift is to enjoy it, to thank God for it, and let some of it spill over. If something in your life came to mind while you were listening, don't turn this into another long list of things you should be doing. Just start with what's already there. And if you're realizing that your life feels so full that you don't have much room left to notice what God may be placing in front of you, that may be worth bringing it into the light. Talk with a wise pastor, a mature friend, someone who knows you well enough to help you distinguish between faithfulness and overcommitment. Ask, what has God clearly placed in my care? What am I holding to tightly? And where might He be asking me to become available? If you or someone you love needs more structured help, you can reach out to us here at Sound Mind. We'd be glad to help you find biblical counseling or connect you with someone near you. You can also follow the podcast on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. We're always posting right in the middle of your week. And hey, if this episode was helpful and you haven't rated and reviewed the show, take a minute. It really does help people find their way here. And for more thoughtful biblical conversations, check out the Postscript. You can search the Postscript wherever you listen and rate and review that show as well. And if you want to know the Bible for yourself, maybe you want to be a pastor someday or a missionary, you really just want to know what God's Word has to say about real life, do yourself a favor. Go to lfbi.org, check out Living Faith Bible Institute. You can see all of the fall classes that will be starting here in a couple of weeks. I'd love to have you in the Intro to Biblical Counseling class. We also have a Counseling Lab 1 class that's probably starting right when this episode is coming out. Please join me. Thank you for listening. Until next time, take care. Sound.